Okay, we're talking about Fragments today, and I really don't have that much to say besides the Owen part of the story.
This is another one that I watched years back, like around the time that it popped up on BBC America for the first time. And so I caught it there, and a surprising amount of it stuck with me. There's specific scenes like all across this episode that I just remember regularly as part of Torchwood and part of this episode, even though I've never gone back to it. Most of the Owen stuff stuck in my memory. Yanto and Jack getting the pterodactyl stuck with me. Surprisingly, none of the Toshiko stuff. That all felt new to me. Jack's whole backstory stuff, I remember that pretty vividly. Brianna was making the same point that we'd made previously about Jack feeling less fun in this show than he did on Doctor Who Series 1. I feel like this episode and his part of it specifically is kind of showing us how that happened. When we see him in 1900 something, and he's just waking up from having been killed in a bar brawl, I feel like that's fun Jack. I feel like John Barrowman is back in that performance for those scenes. And then as he becomes the leader of Torchwood, he becomes this different, more sort of stiff guy.
What I like about Jack's story as well, it adds a lot of context to the line which you see in the intro all the time, which is the 21st century is when everything changes, you got to be ready. It shows, for me, he becomes really obsessed with that because of the guy who killed himself, basically saying Torchwood isn't ready for the 21st century. I really liked how they actually added a lot of context and depth to that line, and that was just a really horrifying moment in general. It shows, I think, makes the switch from the series 1 version of him to how he is in Torchwood. It's very, very good.
Primarily about setting up the 21st century, this big shift in time, is this is where things get difficult. But I was wondering if having that scene set in New Year's '99 was meant to be a roundabout way of referencing the TV movie, because that's when that's set. I'd forgotten that because I was just showing Brianna that movie because she hadn't seen it yet. The setting of that movie is New Year's 1999, so I'm just thinking, while Jack is going through this really depressing moment, Doctor is being born and having a pretty fun adventure.
I'm not sure about that. I think it's just a general reference to, the conspiracy theories over Y2K. They mention the Millennium Bug, which Jack mentions is a literal bug, which I thought was pretty funny. The guy basically sees visions of the 21st century and decides, well, he's going to kill himself before the 21st century happens. I guess that's why they chose to set it there.
My mind also went there because we get the scene right before then where he goes to the girl who I forgot was in this episode from a previous episode, the girl with tarot cards, and she's like, the doctor you're waiting for, he's gonna show up on Earth twice before you run into him. And I'm like, I feel like he shows up on Earth more than twice. Is someone's gonna have to check that
to basically just make sure that Jack doesn't come near him. Based off his attitude in Utopia. That's probably something he would do.
Unless she was specifically talking about the 10th? Does the 10th Doctor only show up on present-day Earth twice before he picks up
Yeah,
Jack?
in his timeline, I think, for the timelines to join together, that's probably it.
The Doctor shows up on Earth way more than twice. And New Year's 99, the Doctor's on Earth right now.
But it's the 8th Doctor who hasn't met Jack yet.
Yeah, no, I think this is a pretty good episode. I really enjoyed this one. I think it's, again, really depressing, really not something that you want to watch if you want a fun, good time, but I think it's structured really well.
I feel it's the type of episode Chris Chibnall does really well. I feel like he struggles when he tries to do, family-friendly stuff. That's why I think his version of Doctor Who falls quite flat. But when he excels, when he is stuff like Torchwood and Broadchurch, where he can go, really into dark material. And I think this episode is an example of his strengths as a writer as well as a drift, because a lot of what happens in these stories is, I think, very dark material. I think he pulls it off quite well, especially the Jack stuff and especially the Owen stuff. It's used to humanize the characters pretty well and show the real dark world of what happened at any time because of this alien intervention. And so that's why I really like this episode. I don't care for the Toshiko stuff much either, because it feels like something from some generic cop movie. I'm not really a fan of that, and it leads into the finale well as also.
Yeah, I think the Toshiko stuff is the weakest part of the episode. It's just kind of forgettable. It's oh, we have to show everyone's backstory, and this is hers, and it's just kind of
It felt the most obligatory, yeah. But here's the thing about the Tosh scenes, is the big thing that stuck out to me about her part is, and speaking of, again, this show being Chibnall doing all of his darker stuff and Doctor Who being where he tries to do the more optimistic stuff. I wonder if this episode maybe explains why Chibnall decided to write out Unit. That automated message in Tasha's cell, the way that Unit treats Taj is ridiculously sinister. And I know I'm officially reading too much into it, but like this is where my mind goes. I wonder if Chibnall out of Doctor Who so that he wouldn't have to write a Doctor Who episode where this really like ridiculous, almost like monstrous, cynical version of Unit shows up that's like takes people, the no due process of law, we will hold you indefinitely. You're not entitled to a lawyer. You have no rights here. It's really ridiculous. And like through that whole sequence, through Tasha being like a prisoner at Unit, my mind is just going, what would the doctor or the brigadier or Martha think if they saw this?
That's pretty consistent actually with how Unit has been portrayed since the 70s. I think like if you watch like Doctor Who and the Silurians, that story ends with the Brigadier basically blowing up and killing an entire species. So it's really consistent with how I think Unit has its good and bad sides. We see a bit of it in the Poison Sky as well, but only it's not touched upon too much.
Yeah, Unit has always had its good and bad sides, and it's always been a little bit less altruistic than the Doctor himself. But there's a difference, I think, between Unit, which is like an Earth defense thing blowing up an alien species, and like fragrantly, proudly violating human rights.
I think it might be a little much to reading into it. I just think he just didn't want them in it because they didn't really become much of a presence until like the Moffat era. I think he wanted it to revert more to like the Russell T Davies kind of storytelling a bit.
Well, having gone back through the Russell era, it's surprising how often they show up. It's just they're always popping in and out.
Yeah, but the Russell T Davies era portrayal of Unit sucks. They basically are just this big military thing, and it's really generic. It's like he just misses the point of Unit completely, whereas I think Moffat actually gets it more. Like they have the whole storyline, I think, in The Power of Three is about how Kate Stewart restored Unit to its origins.
Lucy brings up a good point, which is like Chibnall is the guy who brings Unit back into the Moffat era. So
I feel like he just did it as an opportunity for a Brexit joke. I don't think it was a way to write Unit out completely. It was just a way to say Unit can't be in this episode.
He actually introduced them back into the show, so I don't know what his deal is. I think he just didn't want to write for him anymore.
He did it for two reasons. One, I think it was for a Brexit joke, which was not very funny. But another, because he wanted the characters in that episode to be like helpless and not get help from Unit, because that would have made it a bit contrived. So I think he didn't exactly write them out. He just didn't want to use them in that particular episode and saw the opportunity to make a cheap political joke as well.
One, as a dumb American, I've watched that episode multiple times, and like people keep saying it's a Brexit joke, and I don't. It's just because I'm not from England, and like everyone talks about that Brexit joke like it's really clear and obvious. And
it was something like about how the EU funds certain organizations, right, in Britain, but it doesn't make any sense because Unit is like a global organization. It's not something restricted to the UK. So it's an attempt at a joke, but it doesn't actually make any sense. But anyway, my main point is I don't think he was trying to write Unit out. I think it was just trying to say that Unit can't interfere in this episode. I don't even know why Unit needed to be brought up. I guess it was just an attempt at a joke.
Right, but what Lucy and I were talking about was him writing Unit in The Power of Three. Because Chibnall writes the first Unit episode of the Moffat era.
Maybe he was just like forced to, like Moffat's like, you gotta write this. I don't want to. You have to write it.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is I don't think he's written Unit out completely.
I still think they're gone. They're not coming back. Well, they might come back next season or something, but they're gone for a while.
Yeah, possibly. We don't know.
Getting stuck on this because the only interesting part of Tasha's part of the episode.
Let's talk about Yanto. His base storyline was basically just him trying to get in there so he can help Lisa.
Yeah, but Yanto's story was how Jack wants to sever all connections with Torchwood 1, which is very understandable because he wanted to remake it in his own image. That was the most interesting part of that story for me.
I do like that, actually. Like, because even despite seeing and remembering Cyberwoman, I always forget that Yanto was like a part of Torchwood before he joined up with Jack. Like, that's a detail of his character that always slips my mind. It is really interesting that Jack looks at him as like this representative of, that's the bad Torchwood. I don't want to be a part of that. That's not my jam. Those are the Torchwoods that almost got us all invaded by Cybermen. Thanks, no thanks.
Yeah, he says this in The Sound of Drums. He says, this was a different Torchwood. I remade it in your honor to the Doctor. So it fits in with that pretty well.
Should we talk about Owen?
Owen's story is just depressing as hell, kind of like his whole arc in series 2. I think it kind of actually contextualizes why he completely goes off the rails in Torchwood. Like, he is how he is, this kind of abrasive person he is in Torchwood series 1, because he's just had this absolutely tragic thing happen to him where his girlfriend had a brain tumor. It turns out she had an alien parasite in her brain. He's treated like he's insane after she gets killed, and he doesn't know what happened to her. I mean, it can mess up anyone's mind, that ridiculous series of events happening to someone.
My only problem with it is I felt like they indicated that he didn't fall in love before the episode with the girl that time traveled. Like, that was his first time he actually was having like relationship like that. Felt like before, relationships is just like a quick lay, and he doesn't have like any connections like that. And this was like the first time he really connected with somebody. That's just the way it came off to me. So I felt that jarring that, oh no, he actually was like engaged to somebody.
My interpretation of that isn't that it's like supposed to show you that that's Owen's first time falling in love. It's to show that Owen is more than what he appears, and that he actually does have feelings.
Of being in love and having a relationship and being empathetic, like genuinely empathetic with you.
So this part of the episode like hits me different because it made me realize of all the diseases in the world, ALS is probably the thing that terrifies me the most. That's a thought that occurred to me watching this. This is not by a long shot the only narrative I've seen about Alzheimer's, and it always kind of gets to me because I don't have the best memory. I always find myself like this thing in the back of my head where I worry a lot if I don't remember things, or if someone around me doesn't remember things, like something really obvious, and they don't, like, forgetting words and stuff. Oh no, is this a sign of like a real problem? And am I going to like start getting like important things like relationships and stuff? It's like I have it in the notes. It's like Owen's fiance has ALS, but not really. It's an alien. That's a thought that occurred to me watching this episode. Is like, that's a condition that really terrifies me personally. And so like I can sort of relate to Owen more than usual, even as being someone close to someone who's going through that, and just like, what are you supposed to do when that happens? And then it turns out it's an alien and she's dead. That would be something that's like almost impossible to process. And like, it's no wonder that, like Rob says, Owen is already off the rails when we meet him in series 1. It's like, really, everyone had it pretty rough. Like, I'm not gonna belittle what happened to Tosh and Jack and Yanto. That was all fairly traumatizing, but I feel like Owen emotionally got like the worst end of the stick from what we see in this episode.
I have like short-term memory problems as well, so yeah, that's a thing I worry about too. And like the same thing, like when I see like people that are like older than me or something, and it's like, oh, you forgot that. It's like there's something wrong. The reason why that's just so scary is because your memory is basically like your soul. It's like you're watching someone just slowly their soul disappearing, and it's sad.
Also, Baron Gorman gives the best performance of the episode.
This is really the only story for me that really resonated. The rest I was just kind of bored during. I kind of wish most of the episode was about Owen's backstory with her.
Well, you don't want to do just another sole Owen focus episode, considering he got a trilogy of episodes not too long ago.
I know. I could just watch the 10 minutes with him and just leave the rest. Personally,
this episode honestly hit me like one of those memes where like you send it to the group chat and you're like, tag yourself, which one are you? Honestly, I'm Gwen. Hey, why is he? I woke up late, he gave me a ride. That's me. That's the only impression I got from this entire episode. Like, Owen was really the only one that stood out. Not Jack, because that's nothing new. Not Yanto, because it's cute, but it's a little camp.
It's the lowest stakes of the 4.
Yeah, it's the lowest stakes. Tosh was Tosh. And like, honestly, that was the only moment of the show that resonated with me, and the rest was just, tag yourself. Which one are you?
I do like that delivery from John Barrowman, though. Like, he's laying in the rubble and he sees Reese. He's like, what is he doing here?
Yeah, honestly,
it's a good thing Gwen was late for work. Let's just say that.
That's what I said. That's exactly what I said.
I love the The bit when they're gonna get the pterodactyl, Jack was like, "You think I have dinosaur meds in the back of the SUV?" And Yanto's like, "Torchwood London would have." And Brianna's just like, "This is Cardiff. Have we not already established that Cardiff is inherently subpar?"
Yeah.
Because they used Cardiff as London in Doctor Who Series 1.
Yeah, that's true.
Yanto and Jack, a little subplot. It's cute. That's all I can say. They got good chemistry together, even though I'm not a big fan of Yanto because he's a little boring. I got done watching this episode. I was just kind of underwhelmed, except for that one part that was really heartbreaking. I was just like,
I liked seeing the pterodactyl again. John Art just popped back up at the end of the episode. I'm like, I forgot. Like, it didn't occur to me that like he was only in one episode before this. You think of him as like a character who shows up. He's got one episode at the start and a cameo here and an episode at the end.
I really like John's character in that he's so obsessed with Jack that he'll just do this to get his attention.
He's like, well, now maybe you'll pay attention to me now. Like, he's so upfront about it. It's hilarious.
He's basically playing like a version of Spike from Buffy the Vampire again. I always call him
Exactly.
Spike.
James Marsters will just keep playing villains, Spike, and then it's this, and then it's what's his name's chases dad in Runaways. It's like that's probably the only one where he's not playing like a bitter ex to somebody.
Also, Smallville, he plays a villain.
He's in Smallville?
Me and my mom were watching Smallville, and he shows up like the 5th season, and then he shows up again like I think the 10th season, and he plays a Brainiac, I think.
He's Brainiac?
Yeah.
That means I stopped watching that show just when he showed up.
Yeah, he's another villain again.
Put Brainiac in a Superman movie, you cowards.
I think that's the villain that he played. It's been a while.
It is, yeah. Can't stop bringing up Batman v Superman. It's just
No.
once per episode, it's gonna come up.
Save Martha.
What character named Martha? You can't help but bring it up.
Is that how we're gonna resolve the season? Is that Jack and John are gonna get into a fight, and then someone's gonna mention a name, and it's why did you say that name?
Yeah, they realize the shocking truth that Jack is actually a nickname for people called John.
Oh, and also Jack's brother is here. We don't have the full context for that yet, but it's a mystery. That said, yeah, this is a surprisingly little to say about this episode compared to the quite literally over an hour that we spent talking about Turn Left. No, I enjoyed this episode.
For me, it was like more than 5 minutes.
I think last week's Torchwood episode was much better. I don't think this one's like terrible or anything, but this left very low impression for me.
This one is fine. I feel about this one the way Rob feels about Turn Left. It has moments in it that I think are really, really good, even accepting that like I don't think Tasha's backstory like works as a whole stretch. I don't think it's interesting. The little brief stretch of time where she's being held by Unit, like I feel for her when that's happening. I think the scene of her in the cell is really impactful. Like Owen's whole thing I like. I think the getting the pterodactyl is fun. There's like moments of interesting stuff in this episode, but the whole is less than the sum of its parts.
It's just pretty mediocre for me for, like I said, the Owen stuff. That's really the only thing resonated.
Yeah, I think it's actually very, very good. I don't think it's my favorite of the season. It's up there. I think Tosh's story, this would probably be the best episode of the season for me, maybe next to Adam or Exit Wounds. I think Jack's story, Owen's story especially, really add a lot of depth to the characters and their role in the show. I think there's a lot of interesting ideas throughout the episode as well. I think it leads into the finale, and I think it's very strong overall. I think it's very good.
I think we're done here.
The connection lasted. Yay! See ya.